What's happening, guys? Sam from Warpgate Studios here. I am doing today a video on my snow bases, or my snow industrial bases. A lot of the guys, when I've been doing these bases on Instagram, I've had a few messages asking me to do some videos on how to do all the weathered kind of snowy look on these bases. So I thought I'd do a quick video on a really big base so that you guys can kind of see everything that I'm doing and all the little bits on it. So without further ado, these are all the paints that I'm using. So a real mixture of different paints because I'm not affiliated with anybody. So base coats are going to be cheap gunmetal metallic from Army Painter, and then the Rune Lord brass from Games Workshop. They're the two base coats of metals on here. Then we've got a wash of Vallejo Mecca black wash, which is super nice wash. Then we're going to do a Vallejo Rust Effect wash for Rust Effects, which is kind of cool. And I'll show you all the different things we can do with that. Then I've got some texture that I'm going to put on there. And then on the texture, we're going to give that a colour of Thunderhawk Blue with a wash of Drakenhof Nightshade. And then we're going to apply some Valhallan Blizzard. And in between some of these stages, we're going to be using some Pro Acryl Bold Titanium White to dry brush and give that kind of cold effect. So that's the paints that I'm going to be using. So to start with, I'm going to be using Vallejo Army Painter gunmetal. I'm just going to get a little bit of this on and give this base a complete coat of silver on a nice big old crappy brush, because that is all that is needed for this, just to give it a really good solid coat. So don't worry about dry brushing or anything like that. Just get some paint on here, give it a good solid coat, and just get the color on there basically to start with. If anybody's wondering where this base is from, this is a 3D printed base on filament that I got printed by myself from a Kickstarter called Gothic Imperialis. It was a Kickstarter, and the files are on my mini factory now for people to check out. And yeah, super nice bases, and really kind of cheap to get a full army of custom bases together. And yeah, they're looking good on my army, so I'm kind of happy. So we're just literally giving this a little bit more on my palette, and then we're gonna finish this off. And while this is drying, I can get on and actually do all of the brass work on this. So, and there we go. Nice kind of heavy dry brush type thing, just to get it all on there completely. We got a silver base now, so great. Okay, next. So next is a little bit more detailed. I'm going to take the Rune Lord brass, which is from Citadel, give this a good shake, and just get some variation of color on here, because you could leave it like this and wash it and everything else, but just to give it a bit more variation, I'm going to use some brass on here. And if I grab one of the older bases, you'll kind of see there's a little bit of definition between some brassy bits here and the silver underneath and stuff once it's weathered. So yeah, it's nice just to get a little bit another color on there. And all I'm going to basically do is just take the brass and just quickly go over these struts on the base. And these bases do not take that much time. They're more drying time really than anything else. And once we get all of the colors on here, then we can start playing around with some washes, which is the fun part. So yeah, wouldn't worry about being too neat on this, because again, the weathering and everything else does its thing. And we are going to be applying textures on here and snow and everything else. So and I think we're going to apply some on this little strip here. And just giving the base a little bit more colour for when the weathering and effects go on there. And we've got this strut to do as well, and this little bit here. And I think I may well actually do the in-between struts as well, just to kind of pull this in together. But once these colours are on, you can then start to play with everything else. I'm going to give these a few minutes to dry. And we'll probably need to do the sides. So I'm going to let these dry, and then we'll come back and start with the washes. Okay, so once it's dry, completely dry, we're good to go with our first wash, which is going to be the Mecca black wash from Vallejo. I'm just going to put a little bit of this onto my palette, and then we're going to work with this. Don't go crazy with this. This is quite a dark black wash, and you'll see as I start putting it on there, it just starts dulling everything down, which is kind of nice. You want to just get it into all the nooks and crannies, and kind of just get it on the model. With this being such a large model, make sure you got sort of like nice broad sweeps on your brush, so you're not putting a ton of it in one place. And then you should be good. And you're just dulling everything down, dulling all of that metallic down, so that it starts that weathering process to look kind of nice. And then we'll work on the especially on these large areas, so getting this wash on here, nice broad strokes on a big brush, and it looks a hell of a lot better. So yeah, get it on there. And so that's the first wash. We've got to wait for this to dry, but that's what we're looking at with this one. It's already starting to look awesome, so I'm going to let this dry for a good half an hour, and then we'll come back and get some of the other washes on there. Okay, so the base is dry with the black wash. Now I'm actually going to use something kind of funky, the Vallejo model wash for Rust Effects. Now this is an interesting product because it has the potential to reactivate when you are mixing it with other paints, or when you have got another paint or water near it. So just be aware of that. As far as this goes, I'm going to pour some onto my palette and then give this a coat completely, the whole lot, over with this wash. And it looks heavy at the moment, but it dries quite translucent, so there's not that much on it once it dries. So I'm just going to get a real good coat of this on here, even in the pipes and everything else. Just covering this totally over the model. And you can splotch it in some places and kind of do a little bit in here, there and everywhere, but you'll start to see it very, very quickly start to dry, and it'll kind of just give that brown rusty feel to parts of the model. So I'm going to let this one dry now, and then I'll come back, and then we can give it its first coat of white to start making it into a winter theme. So for texturizing on this, all I'm really going to do is just grab a little bit of carpenter's wood glue and a little bit of sand here, or dirt, whatever you want to throw on there as a little bit of texture. You can use a textured paint for this one as well if you really wanted to. I am going to be using some Games Workshop Valhalla Blizzard in a bit anyway to do it, but just going to get some of the wood glue on here. And on this sculpt there is kind of like a crack, which is kind of nice, so I'm just going to literally be following this and putting some glue in here and kind of using the 3D print for a guide to where I'm going to be putting my texture. And this is kind of like rubble type thing that I'm going to just put on here a little bit and kind of get this in. What I'm going to be doing, because this is so big, I'm just going to drop a little bit of texture, shake it off, give it a good blow to get all of the residue off, and then you've got a little bit of texture in there on that side of things. I am going to add a little bit more just so that it doesn't look weird that there's just a little bit of texture. I'm just going to put a little bit down here on this side. This base is actually going to be for a Votan Hecaton Land Fortress. They don't actually come with bases, but I wanted to kind of have a base to have this match up with the rest of my army. So I'm going to put a little bit there and give that a little bit of a dip in there. And then one last bit of texture on this side. I'm just going to kind of do a little bit in the pipe, kind of drain type thing, and then I'm going to call that good. I don't want to go over the top with a lot of these bases. More is less when it comes to sort of texturing and all those sorts of things. So yeah, don't go nuts with it. And now I'm going to wait for this to fully dry. This is going to need a few hours of drying with the wood glue. Yeah, I'll stop the camera, I'll come back once this is fully dry, and then we'll crack on and keep going with the textures. Okay, so texture's dry, and what we're going to do is we're going to give it a coat of Thunderhawk Blue, a kind of grey blue colour from Games Workshop. And I'm just going to get enough on here. What you want to do with this now, especially on this sort of sandy dirt that we've put on here, make sure you water it down quite a bit, maybe a consistency of 1 to 2 parts, 1 part water to 2 parts paint, and just get it in there, and you'll start to see that it actually starts soaking in to the texture quite nicely. So we're just going to get this in there. All that texture is going to get a blue coat of, or a grey blue coat, and you'll start to see it kind of just smushing and start moving all around into the sand, which is kind of cool. And then once we've done this, it's a case of letting this dry and getting ready for a wash on this. There we go. Awesome. So that's all of the texture done. So I'm going to let that dry now, and we'll come back and start working on the washes on that. Okay, so we've got the Thunderhawk Blue laid down on here, and this is all dry. Now we're actually going to do kind of 2 things, which is kind of fun. We're going to just put a little bit of this Drakenhof Nightshade Warhammer Citadel shade on here, and get this in here just to darken it up a little bit, just give it a bit of depth. and we're gonna get this just put on quickly, and then while this is drying, we're actually going to do another step while it's drying, which is kind of fun as well. So just watering this shade down a touch, because you don't need too much of it. And again, this seeps into the sand quite nicely, or dirt that you have. And we're just gonna, because it's a blue, it's kind of gives that impression of cold and ice and stuff. So yeah, we're good with that. Cool. All right, so that's the wash that we're going to put on the top of that. And then while that's doing its thing and drying, we are going to start working with the snow. Now with the snow, what I use is this Valhalla Blizzard to start with. Believe it or not, this actually dries an off-white. It doesn't actually dry the white that I like, and I'll actually show you how it, sort of what happens to it. But while this is all drying, I'm not going to put any snow on these bits of texture. I'm just going to start putting a little bit of this snow into some places, into some gaps where naturally it might have just built up and a little bit too frosty or something like that. And as I said, we're going to go and try and get something similar to these, which is just patches of little snow that's maybe defrosting a little bit or something like that. So I'll just leave that there so you can kind of reference what I'm doing here. I'm just grabbing my little tool and just smushing it in there. What I do with this textured paint is I kind of get it out and put it onto a model to start with, and then I'm going to put some in this grate as well, so it kind of blocks up. It looks kind of cool in that, and then just smush it in. And what I do is I put this onto areas, and then I'm going to get a brush afterwards and kind of smush it in and start making it, move into the areas a little bit better and just look a bit more natural, because this doesn't look like snow at the moment. Snow is very, very delicate and more smooth. So I literally get my tool, put it on there, on these bits, and kind of just get them into areas that I want it. And then I'm going to probably put a big dump of snow straight there as well. We're going to smush that in, get that looking a little bit awesome, and then maybe a little bit down here as well. And again, with this stuff, less is definitely more. So I got a little bit of blue on it. Yeah, less is definitely more. So you don't want to go nuts with this snow stuff. It actually looks better, I think, if you don't use that much of it. So, and just use it very, very sparingly in the kind of corners of stuff and all that good stuff. So that's where I'm at the moment, and I'll kind of show you what I do with the snow now. So I'll just wipe off my little tool that I used to do it, and then what I'm going to do is get some clear water and then just start smushing this in, and then start working with it to just soften it and smush it down a little bit and make it a little bit less harsh where you've smushed it in on with the tool, and then just start smushing it down with the water. It works very, very well with that, and it's a nice little textured paint. I kind of like it. It's not too bad. I still need to work with it afterwards. If you're going to work with it with a brush, make sure it's an old crappy brush, because the texture that's within these absolutely ruins it. So yeah, I would not ever get a brand new brush on these, because it's rough as hell with them. So yeah, and then I'm just going to start smushing this down on the areas that I wanted it to be smushed in on. Looks a little bit too uniform, so I might have to, it just looks a bit too square, and nature's not like that, so I'm gonna just probably put some more on there. And put a little bit in this corner as well. And once you've actually smushed all of the snow in with a brush, and kind of got it looking good, you can either put some more and layer it up and create more and more snow, or you can do what I'm going to do and then start working with it with some paintbrushes and stuff afterwards. So put a bit down here, a bit lonely down in this part of the base. And then when this dries, this snow stuff, it dries very, very hard. So it's good to kind of dry brush with and work with. So there you go. Okay, I'm kind of semi-happy with that. I'm probably going to put a little bit more up there. So I'm going to grab my tool just to make sure this is, it's a big base, so I want to make sure that I don't go too nuts with it, but maybe a little bit up there and maybe a little bit in some of these cracks, and maybe some in the other cracks as well, just to tie off this side. And grab my old brush again and start smushing this in. And then same with this one over here. Oh, that's fine. And there we go. There we have it. That's going to be my snow that I'm going to do on there. So I've now got to wait for this to dry for probably about an hour or two to get this fully dry, because what I'm going to be doing with it is quite moving around a lot of pigment and stuff on it next. So I'm going to let this dry as it is, and then we'll come back and get some dry brushing on it. Okay, so as we're still waiting for this snow to dry, there's some other stuff that I'm going to actually get on and do. Because this is all of the texture is actually dry now, I am going to give that a little bit of a dry brush with an old crazy messed up brush, just to get a little bit of colour on there, because I want to put a little bit of water texture in. Move that in this kind of like drain area, just to make it, you know, something a little bit more attractive. So I'm going to get a bit of white on these brushes and dry it out a little bit. And then just give this a coat of white. You can sort of see the white picking up the texture nicely. And again, this all adds to the kind of cold feel that I'm going for on these bases of, like, you know, cold rocks and all that good stuff. So I'm going to just get these with a nice coat. I'm not going to touch anything else at the moment because it's still drying, but I'm going to give the drain area a little bit of a white dry brush as well, just so that it's got that coldness underneath it when I actually pour it. I'm going to use some Vallejo water texture, which is kind of cool. It's not the best water texture that I've got, but this is actually going to do kind of nicely. And I'm just going to pour it over the rocks and stuff that I've got in there to kind of give that impression that it's doing its thing. Because this is a little bit level, what I'm going to do is grab some silly putty, which I've used for masking on dry brushing, and I'm just going to literally stick a little bit of this at the end of this base to stop any of the water running through. It's a nice little kind of barrier, and it allows me to just fill it up with the water in here and get this looking pretty decent. So just going to do that, let that dry for a little bit. This shrinks majorly. This really does. This still water from Vallejo shrinks quite a bit. I have got some on another base, which is this one, which is what I've done, and this is kind of got like a level on it. It's okay. It probably needs 2, 3, 4 coats on it of pouring water in there before it gets to a decent amount. But yeah, it's okay. It'll flow nicely in here, and then yeah, we'll hopefully that'll dry when the snow dries, and then we can come back and start working on it. So okay, so that's all dry. We're good to go on that side of things. So all I'm really going to do now is just give this a good decent dry brush of white to get this completely wrapped up, this base, because it's looking pretty rocking. You could put some more bits of battle damage or build up the snow and those sorts of things. I'll also show you can kind of see where the rust effect has kind of gone into a little bit into the snow, which is fine because it's turning the snow a little bit different colors, and it's just made it a little bit less crazy on the snow side of things. But we're going to go over all of this with Pro Acryl, the white, the titanium white. In my opinion, this is probably the best white that is out there on the market at the moment. It is beautiful. Pigment count in it is very good. It's a very strong white and goes superbly well in a few light coats. You'll definitely see some very cool stuff with it once you get going. So really all I'm doing on this now is just finishing this off by giving it tying it all in by going over it and with a nice white dry brush. So it's just finishing this off and just going over it just to kind of point out all of the little edges and give it just a gentle white finish and just make it look super cold, which is what I wanted to do with this scheme. It's just going over it nice and white, and if you do get a little bit on the snow and those sorts of things, it looks fine because it's just highlights just little bits that are coming out. And yeah, it's all this industrial kind of type. And if you do get a little bit of dry brushing on the water, then that's fine as well, because again it gives that impression of ice. And then I'm gonna give this one last little kind of drop of the water effects, and see if this can come out quite nicely. One good thing about it is if you're going for water effects, if you actually apply the this before it's completely cured, you'll actually might get some cracks in it. And with me trying to go for icy type stuff, having cracks in it, totally fine. So I'm good to go on this. This is my finished base. I'm happy to run with this. I may well get a little bit, and I can kind of show you one of the last things that I wanted to do is just literally show you a little bit of white on here, just to show you if you actually pick out a little bit of this snow on here, you can kind of see that the Games Workshop snow doesn't dry entirely white. It's like an off grey white, and you can just gently pick out little bits in it and give this a bit of a shade and layer with the kind of white, just picking out bits. But that's kind of like testament to Pro Acryl, and their white is super white. I mean, super, super white. So yeah, there you go. So that's my paint scheme. Hopefully that's answered some questions from the people that messaged me wanting to figure out how I do it. All of the products that I've used will be in the description in the video. And thanks for watching. And yeah, hope some people can replicate this. Cheers.